Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In the past, we checked out a couple of relatively good value gaming monitors, aka computer monitors, which have the faster refresh rate screen, and they were found for around $200. Well, today we're taking a look at yet another alternative. This one's called the Sansui G32C3. That's kind of a mouthful, but as the name implies, it's a 32-inch monitor, and what makes this one kind of interesting is it's slightly curved as well. And of course, curved screens in the past have sold at a much higher cost, so for this to be found still in the sub $250 range is quite impressive. It retains a fast 165Hz refresh rate, so you should see fewer traces of ghosting or latency. Has HDR, aka high dynamic range, for more contrast and pop, as well as adaptive sync that will further decrease lags, tearing, and ghosting, and also covers an impressive 125% of the sRGB range, or 95% of the DCI P3 color gamut. So it should be pretty accurate when it comes to also doing some video editing and Photoshop work. Watching back movies can also be a good application here, especially since it is a slightly larger screen here at 32 inches compared to the 24-inch and 27 inches that we have seen in the past. But of course, it will cover a little bit more space when you set it onto a desk, though hopefully the slightly curved nature should still make it seem reasonable as you're sitting in front of the screen. You don't have to be turning your head too much to see the entire larger area of the display. It's a VA type monitor, however it still promises pretty good viewing angles of around 178 degrees, and the maximum brightness here is 300 nits, which is also, I would say, okay for a laptop or computer monitor that you're using mostly indoors. Again, there's no built-in battery here, and it's of course not going to be as light as one of those portable monitors that you can slide into a bag. So under sufficient shade, again inside of a house or room, it should be fine. Now there are 4 ports on the back of this monitor, so you can connect multiple devices and switch between them, including 2 full-sized HDMI that support 4K input up to 144 Hz, and then there are 2 display ports that support 165 Hz, so slightly faster refresh rate using the display ports. Interestingly, this company seems to also have originated from Tokyo, Japan, from 1944. So this is going to be a pretty interesting option. Again, at 32 inches, it almost stretches the boundaries between what I expect from a mini TV in size versus just a computer monitor. So in the packaging here, we have just a quick user guide, and then all the different parts which are separately wrapped are constructed out of aluminum alloy, have a good heft to it, and you also get a bonus display cable here using the display port. This back here consists of the arm for the monitor to then snap into the bottom base, which is also again crafted out of metal. You can adjust the angle as well as the tilt pretty freely, and there's a pretty dramatic profile look made of this translucent plastic, and just gives it more of that gaming aesthetic, I suppose. Definitely makes it look a lot more expensive than the price here would imply. And there's also a separate compartment here for the power adapter, using a standard barrel plug. Pretty good cable length, although there is no HDMI standard cable included. Now underneath this, you'll have the monitor itself, and it is packaged in a way where it is protecting, of course, the screen from damage, and you can immediately see the curved nature as well once we lift it up. And ever since I covered the LG G Flex smartphone from years back, that was kind of the first slew of curved display phones, I've always thought that it's a very cool concept because it makes content feel more immersive, almost like a small IMAX theater of sorts. This is that on steroids in a way. But it's also impressive because on the G Flex and on many other curved phones, it's using a flexible OLED display. And I've always had the conception that other display technologies would be more difficult to make curved or flexible due to the display stack, typically involving more layers of materials. So it is pretty cool to see such a large panel that's curved, which isn't OLED. And of course, the cost of manufacturing being much lower here. Now, it's not technically the slimmest monitor in the world, as you can tell there, and that is, again, also due to the display type being VA instead of, say, true OLED, but still is good enough. Bottom here features the 4 input display ports, as well as the DC for power and the headphone jack. And there's no screwdriver required for assembly. Even the base here comes with its own easy tab that you can use to twist to lock everything into place, taking just about a minute to snap everything into place. And on the back of the monitor, you can see the sticker states that it looks like they have an office location here in California as well. So here's a closer look at the monitor, and the curved nature really becomes more obvious when you're looking at it slightly more tilted or slanted angle, and it does have a pretty cinematic effect, I have to admit. It does feel like you're gently hugged by this visual experience, and again, the ability to just see a little bit more without having to rotate your neck quite as much, since the screen is kind of curved off towards you as the center point. The screen has also been treated with this matte texture to it, so as you can tell, it's not going to reflect too much of light when you're indoors, and still looks pretty clean, and again, very small bezel, so you have a overall quite impressive screen-to-body ratio going on. Now here's some of the advanced system menus. We're able to tap again here to jump into options like changing the brightness, higher or lower, HDR turn on. We can take a look at the difference here versus it turn off. There's just a very slight adjustment when it comes to saturation, although it's pretty subtle, to be honest. Even the default mode already looks quite good from a color perspective. Everything does seem reasonably attractive, and you can also change options here, including the image aspect ratio. Sharpness can be manually cranked up, as well as the black levels. So here's a quick example of the maximum black level setting versus kind of minimizing the black level setting. You can tell how the kind of contrast there will also change. Under color settings, we can also play around with the picture mode, including Office, slightly more muted for document reading. There's a high FPS mode for gaming. You can also go into a RTS mode as well. Adaptive Sync, here's one for racing games. sRGB for color accurate material if you're looking at images, for example. Energy saving mode, which will automatically dim the screen a little bit more, and also a standard mode that you can play with. We can also change properties like gamma, turn on or off the blue light mode if you want it to be, again, used for reading purposes. That will also kind of turn off this particular color in order to make it easier on your eyes as an alternative to some of those, for example, e-ink monitors on the market. Of course, not quite to the same extent, but giving you an idea there, if you don't need it to be super color accurate, that is. And you can also change the color temperature manually here as well, going into a user-defined profile of adjusting the red, blues, and greens yourself using the sliders versus some of the presets here. This one here called cool versus normal versus warm. Gaming setting here to turn on the adaptive sync functionality, again, just to eliminate any tearing, for instance. Also kind of change the response time. An auto timer function can also be activated to turn off the screen when it's not being used, and you can even change elements like the transparency effect of the screen. Additionally, you can have it automatically detect different types of input sources. So by default, it will start off, for example, using HDMI, but you can also kind of easily cycle through the other I/O options or have it detect what you have plugged in, and it will intelligently switch into that particular source. So those are all the different settings. I would say compared to other monitors, it's nothing that we haven't seen before, but overall good to have. Again, those color adjustment as well as fast refresh rate, blue light modes that they claim, again, can be found there. Even though the menu system perhaps isn't the most elegant thing in the world, using the buttons you can kind of get around and navigate it without too many issues. So if we zoom all the way in, you may not notice pixels per se, but it's not going to be 100% perhaps as crisp as, let's say, a 4K screen or, again, a phone screen that has a 1080p res, but more densely packed pixels per inch. That being said, definitely not bad, and again, text details already look sharp enough, and especially when it comes to moving images, when you're gaming or watching video content, it really is quite cinematic. So not too problematic. I would say sharpness is, again, more than satisfactory for a budget monitor. So let's also do a kind of a quick video playback test here next. And right now we are loading this back at a higher, again, resolution, so we should get the full advantage of what this screen is capable of. And again, just very cinematic and immersive as you're looking at video content with that curved nature. Again, colors looking quite good, even on the default mode without cranking it into something super saturated using the advanced settings. And that curve is noticeable enough, I would say. And here's a few more demos of just some gaming in action, as well as what the display here looks like. Again, all quite sharp and impressive from a visual perspective. And now moving into a couple more demos, this one here really showing off the contrast of the screen as well as some of the blacks here in the background. And I have to say it is, again, doing a really good job. For a non-OLED screen, I do think it pops a little bit more compared to, say, an IPS LCD panel, as you saw there in some of our earlier examples of twisting and turning the screen. Colors only wash out too much as you're looking at it slightly off axes as well. So pretty good for a VA type display. And I would argue that off-axis viewing is also not going to be quite as applicable here because of the curved nature. It really suits the purpose of one or two people sitting towards the middle and that acting as a center point. That's really the best seat in the house, so to speak, compared to, I guess, a flat screen. Maybe one advantage is more people can see it and still have a fairly good experience. But on a curved display, even though, again, the viewing angles are great, it really, I think, works best if you are sitting towards the middle and you get that most cinematic experience. It almost feels like you're surrounded by just the screen. Now here's also a quick example of how it fares if we're using it for web browsing, opening up documents, and gotta say that it still does a fairly good job. Again, text details I think are clear and crisp enough that when you are doing things like reading, it doesn't become too problematic. Again, images themselves look great, and because of the larger surface area that you have to work with here, you are able to do multitasking a little bit more easily as well. So we can perhaps snap, let's say, 2 panels into place, as well as jumping between different windows on this pretty expansive and impressive display as a whole. Here's kind of a final close-up look again at this screen, and overall, again, looking quite consistent even across its curved area that you are working with. So that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on review of this Sansui curved 32-inch computer monitor / gaming monitor, and gotta say that it's impressive that first of all, we saw these higher resolution, higher refresh rate monitors become available at a lower price range, again around $200, and now we're getting even more improvements in the form of not only larger displays, but also now having curved monitors become available in the same budget price bracket. Just becomes even more immersive, and again, just acts as a pretty cool centerpiece if you're in your office, but also for entertainment purposes as well. Can be thought of as a pretty interesting alternative to a conventional TV, even if you want something smaller, you're tight on space, you're in an RV, kitchen, or in your bedroom, something like that, and you have a computer or a different device like a Chromecast that you're connecting onto it. So you can learn more details if interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That has been the excellent value Sansui 32-inch curved LED monitor.